Imagine the lights dimming, the thick hush of expectancy filling a grand theater. The footsteps echo. And there he stands, a man known around the world, the judge whose glance alone could shatter a dream or build a star. At 66 years old, Simon Cowell has perceived everything the spotlight could offer: triumph, applause, power. Yet tonight, what you're about to witness feels startlingly different. You will see a figure who once seemed invincible, a titan of talent and television. You will see beneath the facade of certainty. Something has happened, something no one expected, something that will change everything you thought you knew about him. We begin not with the cause, you'll discover that in time, but with the fragile hush before the thunder. Listen to the quiet. Pay attention to the tremor in the voice of the man who once invited no weakness. Because what happens next is heartbreaking. What happens next is unexpected. And what happens next might just make you cry. The stage lights always had a way of finding him, slicing through darkness, bouncing off his sharp features, and commanding silence before he even spoke. But before the world came to know Simon Cowell as the man whose raised eyebrow could make or break a performer's dream, there was simply Simon, a boy from London with a restless spirit, a streak of defiance, and an imagination that refused to be contained. Born on October 7, 1959, in Lambeth, South London, Simon Philip Cowell grew up in a middle-class family. His father, Eric Cowell, worked as an executive at EMI Music Publishing, a connection that would unknowingly shape his son's destiny. His mother, Julie Brett, was a ballet dancer and socialite with a sharp wit and soft heart. It was a home full of laughter, ambition, and occasional chaos, but also one where Simon learned early that discipline and charm could coexist. Even as a child, he wasn't the type to follow the rules. Teachers described him as clever but difficult, a boy who refused to be told what to do. School, to Simon, felt like a cage. The repetitive routine bored him, and he often clashed with authority figures who tried to fit him into a box. But when he was passionate about something, whether it was music or film, his focus sharpened like a blade. He knew instinctively that he was destined to create, to command, to be seen. After several schools and countless disciplinary warnings, Simon left formal education behind without a degree. A move that, to most, would have seemed reckless. But for Simon, it was the first true decision of his own making. "I didn't see the point in learning things I'd never use," he would later recall. "I wanted to get out there and start living." In his late teens, Simon bounced between odd jobs, from working as a runner on film sets to assisting in offices. Yet, despite his efforts, success remained elusive. His early attempts at fitting into the normal world never lasted long. Cowell wasn't built for quiet offices or routine schedules. He wanted to feel the pulse of ambition, the thrill of making something happen. It was his father who, recognizing his son's creative spark, helped him secure a position in the mailroom at EMI Music Publishing. It was an unglamorous start, sorting envelopes and pushing trolleys across hallways lined with executives, but it was inside the heart of the music business. And that was enough. For most people, the mailroom was a dead end. For Simon, it was a launchpad. He spent hours watching and listening, studying how deals were made, how producers talked, how artists carried themselves. He took note of who commanded respect and who was ignored. Quietly, he began building connections, developing a sense for what made a song work and what made a personality sell. Still, his journey through EMI wasn't smooth. His outspokenness, which would one day become his trademark, often clashed with the company's structure. He questioned decisions, challenged authority, and on more than one occasion, was nearly fired for it. But his confidence was unshakable. When Simon finally left EMI, it wasn't out of defeat, it was out of conviction. He believed he could do more on his own. So he started Fanfare Records in the early 1980s, a small independent label focused on pop music. It was here that he had his first taste of real success and failure. The label signed artists like Sanita, whose song So Mako became a hit. For a brief moment, it seemed Simon's empire was forming. But as the music landscape shifted and competition grew, Fanfare's success faded. By the late 1980s, the company collapsed, leaving Simon broke and disillusioned. He moved back in with his parents, the weight of failure pressing on him. For a man who had always prided himself on control, it was humiliating. Yet in that quiet, difficult time, something hardened inside him. He learned the value of risk, that you could lose everything and still start again. That realization would later define his career. In those months, Simon Cowell stopped chasing approval. He began shaping an identity built on brutal honesty and self-belief. He no longer cared about fitting into the traditional mold of the industry, he cared about making his own. And though the world didn't know it yet, the man who would soon redefine television entertainment, who would turn judgment into an art form, was just getting started. At 66, when people speak of Simon Cowell, they speak of a legacy, But behind the television lights and polished persona is the same boy who refused to bow to anyone's expectations. What he would face later in life, the pain, the fear, the moment that nearly took everything, began with this quiet rebellion. This was not the rise of a celebrity. It was the awakening of a man who would change the way the world looked at talent, and perhaps, the way it looked at truth itself. When Simon Cowell returned to the music world after his fanfare collapse, he carried more than experience, he carried scars. Failure had humbled him, but also sharpened him. He understood now that charm wasn't enough to survive in an industry that could lift you to stardom one week and bury you the next. He needed instinct, ruthlessness, and vision. In the early 1990s, Simon joined BMG, one of the most influential record labels in the world. His role was modest at first, but Simon wasn't the kind of man who blended into the background. He'd learned to spot potential not just in songs, but in personalities. People buy into people, he often said. They don't just buy records, they buy stories. It was this philosophy that guided his signings. He saw commercial opportunity in acts that others dismissed as novelty, like the Power Rangers theme and even the Teletubbies. While critics rolled their eyes, the sales figures silenced them. Simon didn't care about artistic credibility, he cared about what moved the public. To him, that was art, the ability to make people feel something, even if it was through pop simplicity. His intuition led him to discover and develop artists such as Robson and Jerome, Westlife, and Five. Each success solidified his reputation as someone who understood the mainstream audience better than anyone else. But even then, Simon's ambitions stretched beyond the limits of a record label. He was fascinated by the connection between television and music, how one could amplify the other. He began to imagine a platform where the audience didn't just consume music but participated in its creation. A platform that could turn unknowns into instant stars. By the late 1990s, he started floating the idea around. A televised singing competition that would merge drama, talent, and raw honesty. Many dismissed it as a gimmick. But Simon saw something others didn't, a cultural hunger for authenticity wrapped in entertainment. Then, in 2001, everything changed. Pop Idol was born. Created by Simon Fuller, and judged by Simon Cowell, Nicky Chapman, Pete Waterman, and Neil Fox, the show took the UK by storm. But it was Cowell's personality that became the centerpiece. His unapologetic criticism, his brutal one-liners, and his unfiltered truth made him both loved and hated, and that was precisely the point. Viewers couldn't look away. Every week, contestants stood trembling before him, and the nation waited for his reaction. Simon turned honesty into theater, transforming what could have been a simple talent show into a cultural event. But he didn't see himself as cruel. If someone's chasing a dream they're not built for, he once said, it's kinder to tell them early. That line defined him. To the public, Simon Cowell was the man who said what everyone else was thinking but didn't dare to voice. And yet, behind that sharp exterior was a man who believed in the power of transformation. For every contestant he dismissed, there was one he lifted, often higher than they ever imagined possible. The success of Pop Idol gave birth to something even bigger. And soon, Simon Cowell wasn't just a judge, he was the architect of an entertainment empire. The year 2002 was a turning point, not just for Simon Cowell, but for television itself. When American Idol debuted in the United States, it brought the format of Pop Idol to a global stage. Millions tuned in. It became a phenomenon, and Simon, the British judge with the sharp tongue and black t-shirt, became a household name across the world. America had never seen anything like him. His blunt assessments clashed with the comforting tones of Paula Abdul and Randy Jackson. He was booed, ridiculed, even feared. Yet, as much as people claimed to despise him, they tuned in because of him. There was a strange kind of brilliance in Simon's approach. He understood television psychology better than most producers ever would. Audiences didn't want perfection, they wanted tension, honesty, vulnerability. Simon provided all three. Behind the camera, he was meticulous. He'd study each performance not just for vocal ability but for marketability. Could this singer sell records? Could they connect with the public? Could their story inspire loyalty? He wasn't looking for the best singer, he was looking for the next icon. Under his guidance, American Idol became the most watched show on television. Careers were launched, Kelly Clarkson, Carrie Underwood, and many others. Each success story became part of Simon's legend. But fame is a double-edged sword. The more beloved the show became, the more scrutinized Simon's persona grew. He was portrayed as arrogant, heartless, even cruel. And yet, those closest to him described a different man entirely. Generous, funny, and deeply loyal to those he trusted. Still, the pressure of constant exposure began to take a toll. Simon had created a monster, a public image so powerful that it threatened to overshadow the person he really was. He knew he needed something new, something that wasn't just television, but his television. And so, Simon took the next step in his evolution. He became not just a face on screen, but the mind behind it. By 2004, Simon Cowell was no longer just a judge. He was a producer, a creator, and a businessman whose fingerprints were all over modern entertainment. That year, The X Factor premiered in the UK, a show he co-created that took the competition format to a new level. Unlike Pop Idol, The X Factor gave judges teams to mentor, adding a new emotional dimension. Simon wasn't just criticizing, he was investing in his contestants. Viewers saw a different side of him, still tough, but passionate, protective, even caring. It was genius television. And it worked. The show became a juggernaut, dominating ratings and producing stars like Leona Lewis, One Direction, and Little Mix. Simon's ability to craft global sensations seemed almost supernatural. He knew how to create stories around people, how to turn emotion into spectacle. His next creation, Britain's Got Talent, and its international spin-offs like America's Got Talent, expanded his empire even further. It wasn't just about singing anymore, it was about humanity. Ordinary people, from all walks of life, stepped onto his stage. And there, Simon found something extraordinary: vulnerability. It was the moment when the world saw tears in his eyes for the first time, when Susan Boyle sang, "I Dreamed a Dream." It was a moment that reminded the audience that beneath the hard exterior was a man capable of awe and empathy. By the 2010s, Simon Cowell had become a global force. His production company, Psycho, controlled some of the biggest TV and music properties in the world. His net worth soared. Yet, with that success came isolation. Fame had built walls around him. Every decision he made, every word he spoke, carried global consequences. Behind closed doors, Simon's pace was relentless. Friends and colleagues worried about how much he pushed himself. He worked through exhaustion, sometimes through pain, driven by an almost obsessive need to keep building. It was as if he feared what might happen if he ever stopped. And eventually he did stop, but not by choice. Because what came next would test him in ways that no camera could ever capture. For most of his career, Simon Cowell lived under an illusion, the illusion of control. The perfectly tailored shirts, the calm voice, the confident smirk, they were all armor. Beneath them, however, was a man constantly at war with himself. Success had brought him wealth and admiration, but it also demanded sacrifices few ever saw. Relationships strained under the weight of long work hours and endless flights between London, Los Angeles, and New York. His private life was often dissected in tabloids, leaving little space for authenticity or peace. Simon had always been cautious about love. He once admitted that the idea of vulnerability terrified him, that letting someone close meant giving them the power to hurt him. So he built walls, not out of arrogance, but out of fear. He dated high-profile women, from entertainment executives to models, but genuine connection always seemed to slip away just when it felt within reach. Then, something unexpected happened. In 2013, he became a father. The news shocked the world, and Simon himself. When his partner, Lauren Silverman, gave birth to their son, Eric, it changed everything. Named after Simon's late father, the child softened a part of him that the world thought didn't exist. From the moment he held Eric in his arms, Simon's life found new meaning. "Before Eric, I thought work was everything," he later said. "Now I know it's not." Becoming a father in his 50s gave Simon a perspective that fame never could. He began to slow down, to prioritize family dinners over red carpets, to laugh more freely. He no longer wanted to just be the man behind the world's biggest shows, he wanted to be dad. But life, as it often does, had other plans. In August 2020, during what was meant to be a carefree afternoon, Simon was testing an electric bike at his home in Malibu. It was a small, sleek machine, a new hobby to help him relax after years of non-stop work. But in one instant, it all went wrong. The bike threw him off balance. He hit the ground hard. The pain was immediate and unbearable. Within seconds, Simon realized something was terribly wrong. He couldn't move. His back was broken in several places. Emergency surgery followed, a 6-hour operation in which doctors inserted a metal rod into his spine. The injury was catastrophic. For a time, there were whispers of paralysis. Those close to him feared he might never walk again. Lying in that hospital bed, Simon faced his greatest fear: powerlessness. For decades, he had built an empire on control, controlling decisions, controlling outcomes, controlling how people saw him. But here, in the quiet hum of the hospital, control was gone. He was vulnerable, fragile, human. Days turned into weeks. He missed filming Britain's Got Talent. He missed meetings, press events, the endless motion that defined his life. And in that stillness, he began to reflect, not on what he had done, but on who he had become. He thought about his father who had taught him discipline, his mother who had taught him compassion, and his son who now represented everything worth living for. Recovery was slow, painful, and humbling. Simon had to relearn the simplest of movements. Each step was a victory. Each night was a battle against fear. He often said later that the accident, while horrifying, had saved him from himself. "It made me realize how fragile everything is," he confessed. "You think you're invincible until life proves you wrong." When he finally returned to the public eye, the change was visible. The trademark arrogance had softened. The smirk was still there, but now it came with warmth. Viewers noticed a different kind of Simon, one who smiled more, who listened more, who didn't just judge contestants but felt their stories. He had come back, but not unchanged. Something in him had cracked open, something deeply human. Still, beneath that transformation, there lingered something unspoken. Because even after the recovery, there was another reckoning waiting for him, one not of the body but of the soul. And when it came, it would shake Simon Cowell to his core. It began quietly. No cameras, no press. Just Simon, late at night, sitting alone in his Los Angeles home. The city's lights shimmered below like scattered stars, and for once, he wasn't thinking about ratings, auditions, or fame. He was thinking about time. Turning 66 had hit him harder than he expected. For a man who had once been the face of modern television, age had become an uncomfortable companion. He could feel it, in the stiffness of his back, the slight tremor in his hands, the weariness that no amount of rest could erase. But what truly haunted him wasn't the years gone by, it was the question of legacy. He had built an empire that touched millions, yet in the quiet moments, he wondered if he had missed the very thing he was helping others chase: meaning. He had spent decades discovering new voices, changing lives, creating dreams. But what had he done with his own? The accident had shown him the fragility of life. Now, time was showing him its brevity. One night, he found himself watching old clips from the X Factor and Got Talent. He watched his younger self, sharp, energetic, unstoppable. He laughed at the blunt comments, the arguments, the triumphs. But then, his smile faded. He noticed something he had never truly seen before: the faces of contestants he had crushed with his words. The disappointment in their eyes. The tears. For the first time, he wondered if his honesty, the very thing that made him who he was, had ever crossed into cruelty. It wasn't guilt, exactly. It was awareness. In recent years, Simon had tried to soften, to encourage more than humiliate. But the old clips reminded him of a version of himself that no longer felt like him at all. And so, as he sat there watching the flickering images of his past, Simon Cowell did something he had never done before. He cried. Quietly. It wasn't the cry of regret. It was the cry of release. He realized that the world had seen him as the man who defined talent, but he was still learning what it meant to be human. The next day, Simon called a meeting with his team. He spoke with a calm but resolute tone, the tone of a man who had seen both triumph and truth. He told them he wanted to change the direction of his work, to focus more on hope than criticism, to give more people a chance to dream without fear. The announcement stunned everyone. For decades, Simon had been television's iron judge, the gatekeeper of perfection. But now, at 66, he wanted to be something different: a guide, a mentor, maybe even a friend. He began spending more time with his family, less time in boardrooms. He began producing shows that celebrated joy over judgment, passion over perfection. He started mentoring young producers, teaching them not just how to build an empire, but how to sustain a soul. Simon Cowell had spent a lifetime shaping other people's stories. Now, he was finally rewriting his own. Yet, what made this transformation most powerful wasn't that the world saw it, it was that he did. Because for the first time, Simon Cowell didn't just hear the applause. He understood its echo. The soundstage was silent except for the hum of lights overhead. Simon Cowell, now 66, stood off to the side, watching a young singer step nervously onto the Britain's Got Talent stage. The audience held its breath. The performer took a deep inhale, trembling, and began to sing. A voice so fragile yet so pure that the room seemed to stop moving. For a long moment, Simon didn't speak. The camera zoomed in, waiting for one of his infamous remarks. But instead he simply smiled, a soft, knowing smile. The audience, expecting the sting of sarcasm, saw something else instead: warmth. This was not the Simon Cowell of 2 decades ago. This was a man who had learned to see beyond imperfection. The once feared critic had become something gentler: a mentor, a father, a survivor. At 66, Simon's life looked very different. Gone were the endless nights of editing footage and chasing ratings. His workdays now ended early enough for dinner with Lauren and Eric. He traded late-night parties for long walks by the sea. The noise of fame had quieted into something resembling peace. His face bore the traces of time, lines earned not just from age, but from experience. Yet, behind those lines was a lightness that hadn't been there before. He laughed more easily now, smiled without calculation. Even his signature black t-shirts seemed less like a uniform of control and more like the comfortable clothing of a man content with himself. Professionally, he remained a force. His production company, Psycho Entertainment, continued to thrive, but with a renewed mission, to inspire rather than intimidate. Simon had shifted focus toward projects that showcased resilience, kindness, and the beauty of unexpected talent. In interviews, his tone had softened. He spoke less about competition and more about compassion. He openly credited his family and his accident for that shift. "I used to think success was about power," he said once. "Now I know it's about peace." The audience that once tuned in for his brutal honesty now admired his empathy. Viewers felt closer to him, not to the celebrity, but to the man. They saw a Simon Cowell who could cry at a performance, who could stand up and applaud a dreamer, who could admit that even the strongest among us can fall and rise again. Yet, even as he appeared calm and fulfilled, Simon remained deeply introspective. Friends said he often spoke about legacy, not in terms of wealth or fame, but of impact. What did he leave behind? What did his work mean? Did he make people's lives better, or did he simply entertain them? In those moments, he'd often return to his greatest teacher, his son. Eric, now a young teenager, had become the center of Simon's universe. They were inseparable, riding bikes together, building Lego sets, watching movies. Simon often joked that Eric had inherited his honesty but not his filter. But behind the jokes was a tenderness that defined his later years. He wanted to be the father he never had the time to be before. He wanted to teach Eric not how to win, but how to be kind. His friends and colleagues often said Simon seemed lighter, as if he'd finally laid down the weight of the empire he built. Yet even in peace, there was melancholy, the bittersweet realization that time was moving faster now, that there was still so much he wanted to say and do. Every so often, late at night, he'd step out onto his balcony, look at the Los Angeles skyline, and think about everything that had brought him here. The ambition, the mistakes, the pain, and the love. He'd smile, shake his head, and whisper to himself, "Not bad for a mailroom boy." At 66, Simon Cowell wasn't the man the world met in the early 2000s. He was something greater, and at the same time, something simpler. A man no longer chasing perfection, but cherishing imperfection. And for perhaps the first time in his life, that was enough. The transformation of Simon Cowell wasn't just a story about success and recovery, it was a meditation on change. For decades, he had been defined by his authority, his control, and his cold precision. But in the quiet hours of his later years, Simon began to understand something far deeper, that true power lies in vulnerability. After his accident and the emotional reckoning that followed, Simon's world shifted from the outside in. He no longer viewed his shows as products, he saw them as platforms for hope. Behind every act, every tear, every performance, he saw a reflection of his own journey. The man who once believed that talent could be measured by perfection now believed that talent was born from struggle. Sometimes, he said during an interview, the best voices are the ones that have been cracked by life. He often revisited the people his career had touched, not the winners, but the forgotten names. He reached out privately to former contestants, offering support, mentorship, or simply an apology for the harshness of his early days. Many were surprised. Some cried. It was his quiet way of balancing the scales. In the aftermath of all he'd endured, Simon had found a kind of grace. He no longer needed the applause, though he still loved the energy of it, but he no longer depended on it. He'd come to see that the most meaningful legacy wasn't written in record sales or ratings, but in the lives he'd changed along the way. Still, reflection carried its own weight. There were moments when he'd sit in his home studio, scrolling through years of footage, and think of those who had stood before him, trembling, hopeful, desperate. He knew he had played the role of both savior and destroyer. But now, he wanted to be something else entirely, a storyteller who gave people the courage to dream again. Those who know Simon today describe him as softer, wiser, and more grounded than ever before. He rarely raises his voice, he laughs at his own mistakes, and when asked what advice he'd give his younger self, he answers simply, "Be kinder. To yourself and to others." The world still sees him as the mastermind behind Got Talent and X Factor, but those close to him know the truth. Simon Cowell has become something more than a producer or judge. He has become a living lesson in resilience. In his rare moments of solitude, Simon writes notes to himself, thoughts he says he'll one day turn into a book. Some are about fame, some about fatherhood, and some are simply reminders. One note, written in his unmistakable handwriting, reads, "You can't control how long the spotlight lasts, but you can choose what it shines on." That line captures everything about who Simon Cowell is at 66, a man who once thrived on control but now finds peace in surrender. A man who once defined dreams but now nurtures them. And as the credits of his extraordinary life continue to roll, one thing becomes clear: his story isn't about judgment anymore. It's about redemption. Because in the end, Simon Cowell's greatest creation wasn't a TV show, a pop star, or a global franchise. It was the man he finally allowed himself to become. When the lights fade and the applause quiets, what remains of a man who spent his entire life in front of the world? For Simon Cowell, that question lingers in every reflection, every hesitant smile, every quiet moment before sleep. At 66, he has built an empire that few could ever dream of, yet, the true measure of his legacy cannot be found in ratings, trophies, or bank accounts. It lives in something far more intangible: the lives he has touched and the truths he has learned along the way. From the young hopefuls who stood trembling before his sharp critiques, to the millions of viewers who found courage through the stories his shows told, Simon's influence has rippled far beyond the television screen. He taught the world that talent is everywhere, in the nervous laugh of a shy teenager, in the cracked voice of a mother who sings to heal, in the trembling hands of a magician who never stopped believing. For years, Simon's name was synonymous with judgment. But in his later years, it became something more, a symbol of transformation. His career told two stories: the rise of a man who conquered the entertainment industry, and the rebirth of a man who learned the power of compassion. His colleagues often say that Simon's greatest contribution wasn't American Idol or The X Factor or Got Talent. It was how he reshaped the way people looked at themselves. He reminded everyone that dreams are worth chasing, even when the world says no. Still, the road to legacy is never without regret. In candid interviews, Simon has admitted that he once prioritized work over everything: friendships, family moments, even love. "There were years when I thought happiness was measured in success," he said quietly during a recent conversation. "Now I know happiness is measured in time, who you spend it with, and how you spend it." It's this awareness that fuels his current work. Instead of building shows that create stars, Simon now focuses on projects that create impact. His new ventures center on mental health in the entertainment industry, giving platforms to stories of resilience and recovery. "I've seen too many people lose themselves chasing perfection," he told one interviewer. "It's time we celebrate people for who they are, not who we want them to be." And yet, for all his wisdom, Simon Cowell remains deeply human. Still self-deprecating, still funny, still a perfectionist in small ways. He can still be blunt, still unfiltered, but there's kindness in his words now. Where there was once sarcasm, there is sincerity. He is also acutely aware of the world his son is growing up in. A world faster, louder, and more judgmental than ever. Simon speaks often about wanting to protect Eric from the pressures of fame and social media. "I want him to know that failure isn't the opposite of success," Simon said. "It's part of it." Perhaps the most touching part of Simon's later years is the quiet way he gives back. He donates privately to hospitals that helped during his recovery, supports animal welfare charities, and funds music education programs for underprivileged children. Rarely does he announce these efforts publicly, not out of secrecy but humility. For a man once obsessed with being seen, Simon Cowell has finally learned the value of doing things unseen. As for what comes next, Simon remains deliberately vague. When asked about retirement, he smiles and shakes his head. "I don't think I'll ever really stop," he says. "I'll just do less, and enjoy it more." He still loves walking into a studio and watching dreams unfold. But now, he sits back a little further, claps a little louder, and lets others take the spotlight. He doesn't need to be the center anymore. He's finally found peace at the edges. And so his legacy grows, not from what he built, but from what he became. Because Simon Cowell's story isn't about the man who ruled television. It's about the man who learned that behind every dream, every performance, every note, there is a heart. And that, in the end, is what lasts. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video. It helps us share stories that remind the world what truly matters. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because we have more powerful stories ahead. Stories of resilience, loss, and the quiet triumphs that define the human spirit.